I think we've heard it here this evening, and I don't think it's any mystery to many people in this country. Our economic meltdown of 2008 was fueled by Wall Street. The biggest banks gambling with our money, taking advantage of people in the home mortgage crisis, paying themselves giant bonuses, bankrupting the country, and then looking for a handout from the federal government. Too big to fail was real. The federal government stepped in, gave them interest-free loans. They still have paid themselves giant bonuses, but I'm not convinced that these largest of banks on Wall Street wouldn't do it all over again if they could find an exotic investment of which they could pay themselves obscene amounts of money. I think Dodd-Frank, creating additional oversight on Wall Street to protect consumers and make sure those of us who are paying taxes are not bailing out these big banks after they have taken advantage of people, is the right move. I think this oversight is absolutely necessary, but I also want to make sure that it doesn't have unintended consequences on our small banks, our community banks, because they are the backbone of our small business community, and we need them. So I don't want to lump in on these small banks with Dodd-Frank and the Wall Street banks that got us into this position. So I think we should be looking for a prudent way to enforce Dodd-Frank and make it as strong as we can so we don't end up in 2008 again.
Well, I did vote for the Wall Street reform because after what we saw happen in 2008 where they pushed us right to the edge of a depression when we had all had enough. And I don't think it was as tough as it should have been, but it was as tough as it could be considering all the special interests that were there fighting us every single day. So what we got out of that was we got a plan now where we don't have to worry about too big to fail anymore because they actually have to plan their own death, it's called, in case it happens again. And we also put the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau in, which I'm absolutely delighted to say is going to be sitting there for us. And we also toughened up and made tighter regulations so that the books will be looked at a little more closely. Now, does this take care of all the problems? Does this mean they won't be able to do this again? Of course not. We have to regulate, and we have to stay on them, and we already see lots of ways that they're wiggling around some of it. And that's why you need to have members of Congress who are advocates for the public. Because, and then to find out who's an advocate for the public, you want to look at who finances them, who contributes money to their campaigns. If you really want to know who's going to protect the consumer, who's going to protect the middle class, who's going to protect the people of the country, you need to see the financial records of the people who are running for Congress and see who they take money from. That was the biggest problem that we had as we worked to reform, that there were so many members of Congress who were sitting way too close to a lot of lobbyists and a lot of banks, and so it kept us from having everything that we needed.
The bailout of the big banks, I think, caused a couple of things to happen. It focused our attention on what's wrong with the system, and then it forced Congress, which was a good thing, to come up with a remedy. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is there in place to help simplify the communication between financial institutions and consumers. The one thing that I think we need to look at, which we haven't yet, is making a return to Glass-Steagall, which would separate which would separate the role of investment banks and commercial banks, and so there would not be any proprietary trading allowed. When I was working in the investment business, one of the things that we pushed for was greater transparency and disclosure of practices in all sectors, including the financial sector. We worked with the Securities and Exchange Commission to make sure that some of the regulations that were in place were actually being enforced. And that's an area that I think that we could really focus on. There are plenty of rules on the books, but what we don't have are boots on the ground to enforce them.